The snow had been falling for 3 days straight, blanketing the rolling hills of Montana in a silence so complete it seemed the world had stopped breathing. Marcus Webb stood at his kitchen window, watching the white curtains of precipitation obscure the mountains in the distance, his coffee growing cold in his hands. He'd lived alone on this ranch for nearly 6 years now, ever since the divorce, and he'd grown accustomed to the solitude. The quiet suited him. It asked nothing of him except his labor and gave him space to heal in return. But that morning, something felt different. An uneasiness prickled at the back of his neck as he pulled on his heavy coat and boots. The animals needed tending regardless of the weather, and the storm showed no signs of breaking. He grabbed his hat, pushed open the door against the wind, and stepped into the biting cold. The barn stood about 100 yards from the main house, a sturdy structure his grandfather had built with his own hands 70 years ago. Marcus had reinforced it over the years, replaced rotted boards, sealed gaps against the winter wind. As he approached, he noticed something odd. The door stood slightly ajar, swinging gently in the wind. He was certain he'd secured it the night before. His boots crunched through the fresh snow as he quickened his pace. Perhaps a latch had failed, or the wind had been stronger than he'd thought. But when he pulled the door open wider and stepped inside, brushing snow from his shoulders, he froze. There, in the corner near the hay bales, was a figure in white. At first, his mind couldn't make sense of what he was seeing. A woman, curled on her side, wearing what appeared to be a wedding dress. The fabric was torn and dirty, stained with mud and grass. Her dark hair spilled across the hay, and her lips had taken on a blue tinge that sent alarm coursing through his veins. Marcus dropped to his knees beside her, his rancher's instincts taking over. He pressed 2 fingers to her neck, searching for a pulse. It was there, faint and slow, but present. Her skin was like ice. How long had she been here? The barn offered some shelter from the wind, but no warmth. In these temperatures, she could have died within hours. He didn't waste time with questions. Marcus scooped her into his arms, surprised by how light she felt, and carried her through the snow to the house. She didn't stir, didn't open her eyes. Inside, he laid her on the couch near the fireplace and began the careful work of warming her. Too fast could be dangerous, he knew that much. He removed her shoes, the delicate heels crusted with frozen mud, and wrapped her feet in towels. He built up the fire, added more blankets, rubbed her hands gently to encourage circulation. It was almost an hour before her eyelids fluttered. Her eyes, when they opened, were the color of storm clouds, confused and distant. She looked at him without recognition, without fear, without anything at all. Then they closed again. Marcus called Doc Patterson, the only physician within 50 miles. The old man arrived within the hour, his truck struggling through the unplowed roads. Together they examined her, checking for frostbite, hypothermia, injury. Her fingers and toes were in danger, but if they could keep them warm and maintain circulation, she might keep them all. No broken bones. No obvious trauma beyond exposure and exhaustion. "She'll need watching," Doc Patterson said, packing up his bag. "Keep her warm, get fluids in her when she wakes properly. Call me if her condition changes." He paused at the door, his weathered face thoughtful. "You know who she is?" Marcus shook his head. "Found her in my barn this morning. No idea how she got there or how long she'd been out in the cold." "That's a wedding dress," the doctor observed unnecessarily. "Someone's looking for her, I'd wager." But when Marcus called the sheriff's office, he learned something surprising. There had been a wedding scheduled at the Stevens Ranch, his nearest neighbor 5 miles down the road. According to Sheila at the switchboard, who always knew everything happening in the county, the bride had run away during the ceremony itself. Just stood up, gathered her skirts, and bolted. They'd been searching for her since yesterday afternoon. Marcus hung up the phone slowly. His neighbor, Bill Stevens, was a hard man. Cold. The kind who measured everything in terms of profit and loss. His son, Derek, had inherited those qualities and added cruelty to them. Marcus had seen how Derek treated his horses, heard rumors about his temper. If this woman had run from Derek Stevens on their wedding day, she'd had good reason. She slept through the rest of that day and into the night. Marcus kept watch from a chair nearby, feeding the fire, checking her temperature, making sure the color returned to her extremities. He dozed fitfully, waking at every small sound. When she finally woke fully, it was just past dawn. Her eyes found him across the room, and this time there was awareness in them. Awareness and terror. "You're safe," Marcus said quickly, keeping his voice low and calm. "My name is Marcus Webb. You were in my barn, nearly frozen. I brought you inside. You're safe here." She stared at him for a long moment, then began to cry. Not dramatic sobs, but silent tears that tracked down her cheeks as her body shook. Marcus felt helpless in the face of such grief. He brought her water, made her tea, offered her food she couldn't eat. It took 3 days before she spoke more than a few words. Her name was Elena. She was 26 years old. She had been engaged to Derek Stevens for 8 months, and during that time, she'd learned what kind of man she'd promised herself to. The engagement that had seemed like security for a woman with no family and few prospects had revealed itself to be a cage. Derek's charm had evaporated once he'd secured her agreement, replaced by possessiveness, control, and a temper that turned violent when she'd tried to end things. "I waited until the wedding," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought if I objected during the ceremony, there would be too many witnesses. He couldn't hurt me in front of all those people. But I miscalculated. I thought there would be more support, more people who would understand. Instead, I just saw his face. The rage. And I ran." She'd fled in her wedding dress, her only thought to get away. She'd run through fields and over hills, with no clear destination, until the storm had overtaken her and darkness had fallen. She'd seen the barn and taken shelter, but by then, hypothermia had already begun to claim her. She remembered very little after that. "They'll be looking for me," she said, fear sharp in her voice. "He won't let me go. He thinks I humiliated him." Marcus considered his options carefully. He could call the sheriff, but Bill Stevens had influence in the county. He could drive Elena to the next town, but the roads were still mostly impassable, and she wasn't strong enough for a difficult journey. Or he could do what his instincts told him to do. He could protect her. "You can stay here," he said, "until you're stronger and the weather clears. Until you figure out what comes next. No one needs to know you're here." Elena looked at him with something like hope dawning in her eyes. "Why would you do that? You don't know me." Marcus thought about his own past, his own mistakes, the second chances he'd needed. "Because it's the right thing to do." The days turned into weeks. The storm eventually passed, but winter kept its grip on the land. Elena recovered slowly, gaining strength, losing the haunted look that had shadowed her eyes. She proved herself useful around the ranch, insisting on earning her keep despite Marcus's protests. She learned to tend the animals, to cook the hearty meals ranch work required, to find peace in the rhythm of rural life. They didn't speak much at first. Marcus wasn't a man of many words, and Elena seemed content with silence after so much chaos. But gradually, in the evenings by the fire, they began to share pieces of themselves. He told her about his failed marriage, the dreams that had crumbled, the slow rebuilding of his life. She told him about growing up in foster care, always searching for belonging, mistaking control for care. The first time Marcus heard her laugh, he was mending a fence and she was feeding the horses. The sound carried across the snow, clear and genuine, and something in his chest loosened. He realized he'd been lonely without knowing it, that the silence he'd thought was healing had been more like hibernation. In late February, a truck came down his long driveway. Marcus saw it from the barn and recognized it immediately. Derek Stevens. His jaw tightened as he walked out to meet him, positioning himself between the truck and the house. Derek climbed out, all false friendliness and cold eyes. "Marcus. Been meaning to stop by. You haven't seen anyone unusual around here, have you?" "A woman." Marcus kept his expression neutral. "Why would I have?" "My fiancé had some kind of episode," Derek said, his voice taking on an edge. "Ran off during our wedding. We're worried sick about her. She's not well, you understand. Not stable. Needs help." Marcus recognized the lie in the way Derek's hands clenched, in the possessive anger barely contained beneath the concerned act. "Haven't seen anyone," he said flatly. Storm like we had, anyone lost out there would have frozen. You check with the sheriff. Derek's eyes narrowed. Of course. Just being thorough. He glanced toward the house. Mind if I look around? Yes, I mind. This is private property, and you don't have a warrant. For a moment, Derek's mask slipped entirely, and Marcus saw the violence there, barely restrained. But they were both grown men, and Derek wasn't stupid enough to start something he might not finish. He climbed back into his truck with a final warning. If you hear anything, you'll let me know. Neighborly duty and all. Marcus watched him drive away and didn't move until the truck disappeared. Inside, he found Elena standing by the window, pale but composed. He'll come back, she said. Let him. He's got no claim on you now. But Marcus knew it wasn't that simple. He spent the rest of that day thinking, planning. That evening, he made a proposal. I need to hire someone, he said. Ranch this size. It's too much for one person. Position comes with room and board. Fair wages. You interested? Elena understood what he was offering. Legitimacy. A reason for her to be there that had nothing to do with running or hiding. A new beginning built on honest work. Yes, she said simply. Over the following months, Elena became an integral part of the ranch. She learned to drive the tractor, to help with calving season, to keep the books and manage the accounts with a skill that surprised Marcus. She was smart, capable, and determined to build a life on her own terms. The wedding dress, washed and mended, hung in the back of her closet like a shed skin, a reminder of what she'd escaped. They became partners in the truest sense, their respect for each other growing into friendship, and then into something deeper neither of them had expected to find again. Marcus found himself looking forward to her presence each morning, to the way she hummed while she worked, to her quiet strength. Elena discovered that trust could be earned rather than demanded, that kindness wasn't weakness, that home wasn't a place but a feeling. When Marcus finally asked her to dinner, not as partners or friends but as something more, she said yes with a smile that rivaled the spring sun. Derek Stevens tried twice more to stake his claim, but each time he found Elena standing firm, with Marcus beside her and the law on her side. Eventually, he gave up, his wounded pride less powerful than his recognition that he'd truly lost. A year after Marcus found Elena freezing in his barn, they stood together watching the sunset from the porch, her hand in his. She'd built a life from nothing, found strength she hadn't known she possessed, and discovered that sometimes salvation comes in the form of a stranger who simply does the right thing. Thank you, she said quietly, for giving me a chance to start over. Marcus squeezed her hand. You saved yourself. I just provided the barn. She laughed at that, the sound he'd grown to love. Best barn I ever broke into. And in the fading light, with a mountain standing eternal in the distance, they stood together, two people who'd found in each other exactly what they'd needed. A second chance, a safe harbor, and the courage to build something new from the ashes of what had been.